Well, ho, 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 everybody. Welcome to another semi-daily movie review. 12 Days of Christmas Movies keeps rolling on. Today we're going to be talking about something a little left of center, a little unorthodox, but I think a Christmas movie nonetheless. We're going to be talking about 1992's Batman Returns. The film was directed by Tim Burton, written by Daniel Waters, Tim Burton, and others. It stars Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, Christopher Walken, Michael Gough, Michael Murphy, Christy Conaway, Andrew Bryanarski, and others. The plot synopsis is, while Batman deals with a deformed man calling himself the Penguin wreaking havoc across Gotham with the help of a cruel businessman, a female employee of the latter becomes the Catwoman with her own vendetta. So yeah, Batman Returns. Batman Returns. This is kind of like the one when you're younger. You're like a teenager and you're like, oh, Batman Returns, that's my favorite one. It's the coolest one. It's the edgiest one. It's dark. It's a little fucked up. It's a little subversive. A little psychosexual in a way that maybe the other Batman movies aren't so much. Although I suppose you can make the argument that Batman Forever, even though it did it in a campy way, was dealing with psychosexual stuff. But, you know, that's kind of the subtext of a lot of what goes on in Batman Returns, whether it's between Catwoman or in Batman or Catwoman and the Penguin, and how the Penguin feels about people in his orbit. There's all sorts of weird like innuendos and stuff in Batman Returns. It's the one that is most Tim Burton-esque, right? Like Tim Burton really had this chance, had this opportunity with the studio. You know, this was before he becomes kind of the Tim Burton we know today. He had done at this point, he had done the Pee Wee Herman movie. He had done Beetlejuice. He had done the short film Frankenweenie. Batman 89, of course. That was kind of his big mainstream success. And he was able to parlay that into allowing the studio to basically allow him to make a Tim Burton movie with Batman characters. I would not say this is a good Batman movie. In fact, Batman's kind of an afterthought. It's got kind of a messy script. It's probably a little bit too much going on. You could really streamline a lot, I think, of the plot, and it gets too bogged down with the stuff with the Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot, and what his ambitions, or what what Max Schreck, Christopher Walken's character, wants to utilize him for. And it's trying to do all these kind of interesting things where it's drawing parallels between kind of the types of people you could become if you were kind of orphaned as a young child, and the different circumstances, drawing parallels between Bruce Wayne and Oswald Cobblepot, and even Max Schreck to a certain degree. You know, the types of places where naked ambition will take you, and the kind of person it'll create of you. I think you could make that argument that like those things are definitely there. I just don't think it does a very good job of kind of laying it all out. And then by the end, when it's like, Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle at the end, he's like, we're two of the same, cut from the same cloth. I don't know if I feel like that's a completely earned moment. It feels a little muddy. It feels muddy in a way that I think Batman 89 is not. A lot of people give Batman 89 a shit. They say it's like, oh, it's not actually like a good movie and the script doesn't make any sense. But I think Batman 89 perfectly distills down like the essence and the ethos of Batman, the character, the world that he lives in, and the types of villains that he faces. How they are kind of these mirror opposites of him. He's order, they're chaos. Even though he kind of straddles the line, right, between vigilante justice and official justice, right? How he adjudicates those things, how he makes those kinds of decisions. Now, it doesn't get terribly deep into it, but I think that movie, people give it a way harder time, especially comic book fans, than I think it really deserves. I think it's a much better representation of maybe, especially for that era of Batman, than I think people give it credit for. It really does feel like an amalgamation of things that happened in the 70s and in the 80s. When Frank Miller kind of came on the scene, gave Batman his edge back a little bit. It does feel like it's born from those two eras of Batman. So I've always really loved it. And Batman Returns, while I will say this, it has kind of lowered in esteem for me over the years. I think it's a beautiful movie. I really love like kind of the conceptualization of it. I like the Tim Burton-ness of it. It actually makes it kind of timeless. It has aged pretty well because of that. I would even make the same argument that fucking Batman 89 has aged really well because it was shot on a Warner or Pinewood Studios. It was shot on a lot most of the time. So they had like this complete control of the visuals of what the Art Deco nature of it and how it was going to look. They have complete control of it. So they're creating kind of this parallel fantasy universe. And that really, 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 really comes through in Batman Returns in the aesthetic design. 100%. I mean, this is Tim Burton's, it's akin to, it looks a lot like A Nightmare Before Christmas, to be honest with you, which is obviously, if you don't know, is it's a movie that he conceptualized and produced. Didn't direct, though. Henry Selick directed that movie. Gotta give respect. Actually, the most recent episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies talked a little bit about Nightmare Before Christmas. And so you can go check that out if you want to check it out. Big Paul and me talked about Nightmare Before Christmas and Fat Man. Just before I get into why I think this is actually a Christmas movie, some of the particulars. I really like the performances. Michael Keaton is my favorite Batman, not just from his acting standpoint, because I actually think he's a little stiff in Batman Returns. I think he felt a little lost. But visually, aesthetically, the way Michael Keaton looks in the suit, and this is my favorite Batman suit, actually, is the Batman Returns suit. The Christopher Nolan stuff, that's cool. I think they got, campy, and they were based off the Greek gods when it came to Forever and Batman and Robin. But this one, I feel like it's so perfectly straddles the line between like kind of somewhat plausible and complete comic book fantasy. And I really, really like that. Maybe, Batman v Superman, Affleck's Batman, though, I will say, because that one's clearly directly inspired by Frank Miller. That one looks pretty good too. But I think this one, there's a utility to it that I really like. Like I said, it feels more plausible in the sense that like Michael Keaton, and one of the reasons they cast Michael Keaton, because if you don't know, at the time he was big for like Mr. Mom, Beetlejuice. He was not considered like a leading man hunk. He was a comedic actor. And the reason why he was cast is because Tim Burton thought when he saw him, he's like, this looks like a guy that would have to dress up like a bat to intimidate people. And I think that's why like his presence really works, and especially with the design of the suit and how actually cool and intimidating he really does look. Like, I cannot get enough of just the visuals. Like, I could just watch a silent movie version of this Batman with Michael Keaton. If there's anything that will bring me back into kind of comic book movies, get me excited for something, is if they do that Flash movie and Michael Keaton actually plays a semi-large part as a Bruce Wayne or a Batman, like an older Batman. I would be fucking stoked. I would be so stoked. I was always holding out hope that he would come back and like they would do a proper like The Dark Knight Returns, and Michael Keaton maybe they could get him to come back and do it, but it's probably not going to happen. Although if you've ever seen the DC animated version with Peter Weller as Batman, it's one of the better DC animated movies. Those are pretty hit or miss, but I would say The Dark Knight Returns, the long one, if you get the whole cut, because they cut it into like 2 parts when it initially came out, but they put out like the long cut, which is I think 2.5 hours. Pretty good. I enjoy that movie. I definitely do. Michelle Pfeiffer, I think she's the one who kind of steals the movie in a subtle sense. Danny DeVito is doing Danny DeVito's thing. He's really big. He's really gross. He's very Danny DeVito. He kind of is still doing the same shtick he used to do. Like if you're a fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that's kind of Frank Reynolds' shtick. Frank Reynolds is very Penguin-esque at this point in that series. But Michelle Pfeiffer really gives kind of a great, sexy, cool, badass female performance. Female-centric, female-centric is probably not the right way to put it. I'll say feminine. She is utilizing her sexuality knowingly, kind of using it to take back the power, or whatever you want to call it, against these oppressive systems, where I guess in the movie even kind of posits as like a feminine versus masculine in terms of the world that she exists in, as kind of the mousy Selena Kyle, and then her evolution after she dies or doesn't die, has some sort of maybe brain trauma, changes her personality. This is a phenomenon that people talk about all the time. What's her name? Roseanne. Roseanne Barr? Apparently when she was a kid, she was like very straight-laced, straight-A student, not like outlandish, not like an extrovert as she later became, but she got hit by a car. and it just changed her personality. I think Sam Kinison, the comedian, was also like that. But this is something that's pretty common, actually. People get in car accidents or get hit by cars or fall from high heights. Is that how you say that? Fall from height up there. And they fall from high in the sky and they survive. Oftentimes they wake up with drastic personality changes. So you could chalk it up to that as well. Like the 9 lives thing, the motif in the movie does not feel literal. It doesn't feel like she's literally dying. She's just kind of counting them down in her head, almost as if she's willing herself to live through the experiences until the end, right? Because she's clearly getting shot at the end of the movie and counting them down, but it's just like that willpower thing where she's struggling to fight back. The thing I think that makes this a Christmas movie, though, is that they mention several times, not just the time of year in the sense that it's the time that it takes place, but they also talk about the spirit of Christmas. And one of the, I think, important themes of a lot of Christmas movies, kind of going all the way back to A Christmas Carol, I suppose, or It's a Wonderful Life or whatever, it's about perception. It's about second chances. It's about people trying to come back from what they were doing. They try to thread that needle with this movie. And because you see people that don't understand that, people that fail at it, like Catwoman kind of fails at that. Then you see kind of like Bruce Wayne dealing with it a little bit. That's one of the big problems with Batman Returns. A pretty common criticism is that Batman's not a big factor in the movie. And he's not like completely useless. He's not completely besides the story, but he's just thematically he feels kind of redundant a little bit. Because I think the thing was that Burton, this being a Burton movie more than it is a Batman movie, Burton had already demystified Batman for himself. So he wasn't that interested in the character anymore. He was more interested in kind of these quirky, eccentric, gross out Batman villains. It just seems like more where his heart's at, exploring those kinds of things, the weirdos and how the weirdos feel. Something that he's done his entire career. It's no surprise now. I guess maybe at the time, though, it probably would have been pretty shocking. But I think that aspect of the movie, and it even kind of, it's not just second chances that you want to earn a second chance, is that people give you the room to make mistakes and be forgiven. That is part of the movie. You could even say that Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin, that's part of his character arc. He could have had that, and he chooses not to. He chooses to kind of let himself be taken advantage of. Because even if he ends up capturing Max Schreck at the end and getting the upper hand in the kind of the literal physical sense, the whole movie, Max Schreck is manipulating him, And there's a lot of goofy stuff in the movie. It's like plot-wise, it's pretty contrived. I wouldn't say it doesn't make sense or anything like that. I think it all tracks. It's one of those movies, thematically, you're like, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think you're maybe executing on it as well as you could. But I don't know. I put Batman Returns on the Christmas movie curve. You gotta kind of grade it differently than maybe I do, I don't know, a regular drama or a regular Batman movie. So I don't know. This is not something that's a staple in my rotation, Christmas rotation. It had been a long time since I'd seen it. I was trying to think of things that maybe weren't. I was trying to find movies that weren't like the obvious Christmas choices. And a lot of times people make lists of these alternate Christmas movies, like Die Hard and stuff. And I don't actually think Die Hard's a Christmas movie. And because I don't think it has anything to do with kind of the spirit of the season or anything like that. That's not really what it's getting at all. It just happens it takes place on Christmas, that's all. Which gives the terrorists an opportunity to take lots of hostages because it's a Christmas party. But yeah, if you haven't watched Batman Returns, I'd say give it a spin, It's probably been, it's been a few years since I had watched it. It had been a while. Probably 2 or 3 years since I'd actually sat down and gave Batman Returns its due, its proper respect. I was actually kind of curious to see how it would have aged for me. And while I do have problems with it, like I said, I think it's a perfectly fine movie. It's perfectly watchable. I had a lot of fun watching it this time, problems and all. And just to see Michael Keaton in that suit, dude. So many great, iconic shots in this movie, too. Although surprisingly kind of uncinematic in certain respects as well. because it feels very scaled down in a sense because of the way that, because of the design of the world. It's clearly not very big. They clearly did not have a ton of space in that studio. So the world does feel pretty truncated. It feels pretty small, even smaller than Batman 89, which they had the same kind of thing where it's like they only had like a block to work with. This one feels even smaller. So I would, you could, I suppose, levy that argument against it, that the world does not feel very broad. But I don't know. But overall, I had a really great time revisiting it, and give it a shot. Give it a shot, especially if you've never seen Batman Returns. I mean, what are you doing? Got to get on that. Makes me curious what Burton would have done with Batman Forever. I know he was a producer and he broke the story on it, but didn't happen. He wasn't really interested. I don't think he really was interested in making Batman Returns, which is why Batman Returns is what it is. He's just like, hey, I'm going to get a giant fucking toolbox and I'm going to have like unlimited money and resources. I'm going to make a Tim Burton ass movie. And he did. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my Twitter, for my brother Dan's Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a recommendation for a semi-daily movie review in the future or something for Zoobox Goes to the Movies, we are taking suggestions. Help us kind of guide the ship. Gives me, I own a lot of movies. I have access to a lot of streaming services. Hard sometimes to make a decision. So help me out. All right, everybody. Merry Christmas.